I heard my wife planning my death while I lay there wide awake, inside a body that wouldn't move, not even enough to wipe the tears rolling down my own damn face. And the worst part, she wasn't whispering. She wasn't hesitating. She was calm, practiced. Like killing me was just another chore on her to-do list. My name is Frank Hale, and if you're hearing this, it means I lived long enough to tell the story myself. If you're watching this video, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you were listening from and how you stumbled onto the story of my revenge. I need to know just how far the truth has traveled and who else is finally hearing what they tried so damn hard to bury. I was awake inside my own dead weight of a body, fully conscious, fully terrified, like a man trapped in a coffin he hasn't quite been buried in yet. That's the part nobody ever tells you about. Near death. You don't float. You don't drift. You don't see any damn light. You just stay. Stuck. Listening. Waiting for someone to tow you. Or someone to finish the job. Snow was piling up on the windowsill of the trauma ward that night in Cleveland. Thick, heavy flakes, slapping the glass like cold hands. I couldn't turn my head. Couldn't shiver. But I could feel the temperature drop in the room each time the hallway door hissed open. Machines beeped in slow, steady patterns around me, like the rhythm section of a song I never agreed to be part of. The doctors called it a single vehicle slide-off. Said the roads were slick, and maybe I hit a patch of black ice. But I've lived in Ohio my whole damn life, driven through blizzards that could swallow a tractor-trailer whole. I knew how the road felt under my tires. And I knew in that marrow-deep way, an old man understands trouble, that something about the crash wasn't right. I tried to replay it in my head. The curve, the guardrail, the sudden drop of my brake pedal hitting the floor like it wasn't connected to anything, and then the world turning sideways, metal screaming, my chest punching into the steering wheel before everything went dark and silent. Until I woke up in that bed, unable to move a finger, but somehow still alive enough to hear through every damn yuant. I heard footsteps first. Soft ones. Familiar ones. The smell of Linda's perfume hit me next, sweet vanilla, with that synthetic young note she liked, because it made her feel 30 instead of 47. I used to love that smell. Now it made my stomach crawl. Her voice floated through the room, low and delicate, the way she spoke when she wanted strangers to think she was gentle. "Is he still out?" A man answered. A man I didn't recognize. His voice was deep, careless, almost amused. Completely. They said he hasn't responded once. They stood right beside my bed. I could hear the leather of the man's jacket creak when he leaned down. Somewhere inside me, somewhere my body couldn't show, a cold shudder ran through my bones. Linda exhaled like she was relieved. Good. God, I can't believe he survived the crash. Survived. There was a long pause, the kind that smothers the room. Then the man said, "Hey, don't get all nervous now. The car did exactly what it needed to do. He wasn't supposed to make it this far, but honestly, it works better. With him hooked up like this, it's cleaner. My heart broken, bruised, wired to machines slammed against my ribs. The monitor beside me spiked. I heard it chirp faster. Linda clicked her tongue. Frank always was stubborn. The man chuckled. "You're telling me." For the first time since waking, I tried to scream. I tried to wrench even a single muscle in my neck. Nothing moved. Not a twitch. I was trapped under my own skin like a man, buried alive, screaming behind glass. No one could hear. Linda took a step closer. I could feel the mattress shift faintly when her fingertips brushed the blanket covering my legs. "You think the doctors believe it?" she whispered. "Linda." The man said, voice harsher now. It was snowing. "He's 62. He drives slow as hell. They think he panicked, slid off the road, hit the guardrail. Nobody's looking deeper. 62. Slow. Panicked. Jesus Christ. They were narrating my obituary like it was a sales pitch. Linda sighed, but it wasn't grief. I could tell. I had lived with grief before: my mother dying young, my best friend falling to cancer, my first marriage collapsing under years of silence. I knew what grief sounded like. This wasn't it. This was relief. So? The insurance, she asked softly. Insurance? Christ almighty. That's why we're here, isn't it? The man replied. Tomorrow or the next day, they'll ask you about life support. You'll cry. I heard him smile in the way his voice dipped. You're good at that part. And then you'll say, you can't watch him suffer. She inhaled sharply, the way she always did before lying. I didn't think it would feel like this. What guilty foy, he laughed. A small, sharp sound. Come on, sweetheart. You're doing all this for us. For the life we deserve. Us. Life we deserve. My stomach turned so violently I felt nausea flicker in my throat. I had loved this woman. Hell, I had trusted her with everything left of me after a lifetime of mistakes. And now she stood there inches from my face, planning the exact hour she'd let me die. The machines beeped again, faster. Linda noticed. She whispered, his heart rate is going up. The man stepped closer. I could feel his breath, hot and sour, hover over my forehead. He's unconscious, he said. These spasms happen. Spasms. No. I was screaming. I was begging. I was telling them I was here, alive, listening. But nothing moved. Linda's voice softened, almost affectionate. I just need everything to be over. I'm so tired of pretending. It will be, he murmured. 2 days. Max. They'll ask you to sign. You sign. You get $500,000. We pay off the people I owe. Then we leave this frozen hellhole behind. $500,000. Pay off the people he owed. It all clicked into place. The late-night calls she claimed were from her sister. The credit card statements she kept hidden, the way she'd insisted I update my will last year when I got pneumonia. She'd played the loving wife while mapping out my death inch by inch. And I, old, foolish, lonely, had let her. Linda leaned closer to my ear. I could feel her hair brush my cheek. I'm sorry, Frank, she whispered. But you were never supposed to wake up. I felt something inside me break. Not a bone, not a tendon. Something older, something deeper. The part of a man that still believes in the goodness of the person he shares a bed with. The machines steadied. My heartbeat slowed. I think I was going into shock, but I couldn't close my eyes, couldn't pass out. Their voices drifted away as they stepped toward the door. We'll come back tomorrow night, the man said. By then, he should be close. Okay, Linda whispered. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. They left. And that's when the truth hit me with the force of the guardrail all over again. I wasn't in a hospital recovering. I was in a waiting room for my own murder. When you're lying still as a slab of stone, unable to lift a finger, your mind becomes the only part of you that can move. And mine kept wandering backward, dragging me through the years that led me here, like God was replaying the film of my life, frame by frame, just to ask Frank, how the hell did you not see any of this coming? Truth is, I did see it. I just didn't want to. My first marriage fell apart long before the divorce papers ever hit the table. I spent 30 years working for these Postal Service, long nights, early mornings, snowstorms you had to chew your way through. I carried mail through 3 heart scares and a busted knee, but I didn't carry my marriage the same way. Not with the same consistency. My wife Mary used to say, Frank, you can deliver to the whole damn neighborhood, but you can't deliver 5 minutes of conversation to me. She wasn't wrong. By the time Jake, our boy, turned 17, Mary and I were orbiting each other like two moons around different planets. I loved them both, just didn't know how to show it. Men in my generation weren't taught softness. We were taught grit work breadwinning. But grit doesn't fix a broken home. Breadwinning doesn't heal silence stretching across a dinner table. Then the years rolled by. Mary remarried. Jake packed up his life and moved to Chicago. And me, I stayed in our creaky old house in Parma, patching up gutters and pretending the quiet wasn't killing me. Loneliness is a tricky bastard. You don't notice how sharp it's gotten until it cuts you. I was 58 when my heart officially started misbehaving arrhythmia palpitations, the whole fireworks show in my chest. The doctors said I needed to slow down, take meds that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and avoid stress. Avoid stress. Like it was a choice. Then came Linda. She worked as a receptionist at the cardiology clinic. Warm smile, soft eyes, that sweet, airy voice that made you feel seen after years of being invisible. And I let myself believe maybe God hadn't forgotten I existed. She brought me peppermint candies when I came in for checkups, remembered my birthday, asked about my lousy knee. She laughed at my corny old man jokes, the ones even Jake used to roll his eyes at. It felt like sunlight after a long December. We didn't rush anything. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekends. Before I knew it, she was leaving her toothbrush next to mine, humming in my kitchen like she'd been born there. She was younger, 15 years younger, but she told me age didn't scare her. Older men know how to treat a woman. Frank, she'd say, slipping her arms around my waist from behind. You're steady, solid, safe, safe. Funny how dangerous that word becomes in hindsight. She talked about wanting a home with more safety, more light, somewhere we could start fresh. And me wanting that second chance at happiness, sold the only house I'd ever owned. Bought a bigger place in Strongsville, 2-car garage, wide yard, vaulted living room ceiling. She fell in love with the second she saw it. I told myself the move was for both of us. Truth was, it was for me because I thought giving her everything she asked for was the same as being loved. For a while things were good, simple, quiet. We cooked together. We planted tomatoes in the backyard. Sundays were movie nights with her curled up against me, head on my chest, my old heart thumping away under her ear like it still believed in magic. But little cracks started showing. They always do. First, it was the money talk. She said joint accounts were easier, that she'd handle the bills since I got confused by online banking. I didn't get confused, I just wasn't used to someone else steering my life. But I agreed, trying to be a better man than the one Mary divorced. Then came the late night calls. Quick ones. Whispered. Phone held tight against her ear as she stepped into the hallway. Work stuff, she'd say. Except she didn't have the kind of job that called at midnight. Her laptop started staying open on the counter with tabs she snapped shut the second I walked in. Receipt envelopes disappeared from drawers. My bank statements started arriving half open. Once I woke up around 3 a.m. to grab water and found her at the kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, her back hunched over them, like she was guarding state secrets. When she noticed me, she scrambled to stack them, smiling too wide. Insurance forms, she said. Just boring stuff. Go back to bed, honey. Insurance. The word didn't hit me then. I was tired, medicated, half blind to anything that hinted at trouble, because trouble meant loneliness again, and loneliness was worse than any lie. Another night, I overheard her talking on speaker before she noticed I was coming down the hallway. A man's voice needs to be filed before the renewal date, or it doesn't pay out. Linda whispered sharply, "Can you lower your voice?" Then silence. Papers shuffled. And by the time I stepped into the kitchen, she was stirring a pot of soup like she hadn't been plotting something 2 seconds earlier. Who was that? I asked. Insurance agent, she said casually. Nothing important. Insurance again. A smarter man might have pushed harder. A braver one might have asked the right questions. But older men who've been alone too long, we're easy prey. We cling to softness, like it's oxygen, even when it's poison. Then there were the disappearances. She started going out on Friday nights, saying she needed girl time. But she never smelled like the bars she claimed they visited. Her hair looked too perfect when she came home. Too fresh. Too touched. Once she came home with a scarf I'd never seen before. Expensive. Not her style. I asked where it came from. A friend gave it to me, she said. But the tag was still on it, stuffed deep in the pocket. I kept swallowing these little red flags like aspirin. Bitterness coated my tongue, but I kept taking them, telling myself I was imagining things. Men my age second-guess themselves in ways younger men don't. We think maybe we're overreacting. Maybe we're being dramatic. Maybe we're just old. Then the biggest crack. She asked me to sign a stack of documents for refinancing the house. I didn't read them carefully. God help me, I didn't. Just signed on the dotted line, while she kissed my cheek and thanked me for trusting her. Funny how the word trust turned out to be the nail in my own coffin. And now, lying in that hospital bed after the crash, listening to her whisper about insurance and clean endings, all those little moments came back with perfect clarity. The late-night calls, the hidden papers, the insurance agent, the scarf, the joint accounts, the refinancing, the hushed voices, the way she looked at me sometimes not with love, not even with patience, but with calculation. They were all warnings. Warnings I'd ignored because I didn't want to go through another empty house, another quiet kitchen, another damn decade of silence. I wanted warmth. I wanted a partner. I wanted to believe I mattered to someone. But the truth hit me with the force of a winter wind scraping bone. These were the signs old men like me tend to overlook. Because we're too scared of being alone to see the dangers standing right next to us. The next morning in that hospital room felt colder than the night before, colder than the snowstorm that put me there. The kind of cold that seeps into a man's bones and tells him the truth long before the words ever come. I couldn't open my eyes, but I could tell sunlight was coming through the blinds. It had that warm, pale color that winter mornings carry, soft, almost apologetic. If I'd been able to move, I might have turned my face toward it, let it warm the half of me that still believed life had some kindness left. But that wasn't the world I woke up in. I heard the door open. Linda's perfume drifted into vanilla again, too sweet, too familiar. My pulse kicked up a notch. Not enough for anyone to notice, just enough for me to feel the panic crawl up my throat. Then came the heavier footsteps, the man from the night before. Derek. Close the door, he muttered. Linda obeyed. I heard it latch. The room was ours again, me trapped in my own body, and the two people who wanted me gone. Is anyone around? Derek asked. No, Linda whispered. Nurses changed shift. We're fine. I heard him exhale, like he'd been holding his breath since sunrise. So he said, lowering his voice, even though he didn't need to, did the doctor say anything new? Linda hesitated. They think he's not responding. No reflexes, no neurological improvement. A pause. And then Derek let out a long, satisfied sigh. Good. That means the car did exactly what it was supposed to do. If I could have snarled, I would have. I tried pushing my left hand, tried pulling my right foot. Nothing. My body stayed still, obedient to the paralysis trapping me alive. Linda stepped closer, so close I could hear her tapping her nails against the metal railing of my bed. I was scared, she whispered. The way I don't know. When we were in the ER, I thought his hand twitched. I wanted to scream. It did. I felt you. But all that left me was more silence. Derek gave a small laugh. Linda, relax. You followed the instructions. I'm telling you, that car was set up exactly the way it needed to be. It couldn't have gone any other way. Because I did what you told me. Linda shot back. A little sharper. A little angry. I'm the one who had to sneak out there in the damn cold and start the engine. I'm the one who had to act surprised when the police knocked on the door. You wanted this too, Derek said. His tone changed, more threatening now. Don't start growing a conscience on me. Linda swallowed hard. I heard it. I'm not, she whispered. I just didn't expect him to hold on this long. Trust me, Derek said. He won't make it through the weekend. My heartbeat spiked. The machine next to me chirped faster. I could almost sense Derek turning toward the monitor. See, Linda whispered frantically. It's going up again. Machine's glitch, he said dismissively. He's not conscious. Yes, I am. God help me, I am. The anger rising inside me was so sharp it could have cut steel. But anger wasn't enough to move even a fingertip. Linda paced near my bedside, heels clicking against the white tile. We need to talk about the insurance, she murmured. Derek snorted. Of course we do. I told you. Linda said they approved the increase. The new policy is active now. 500,000, Derek said slowly, savoring every syllable. $500,000 for a man who barely had a pulse even before we touched his car. Linda winced. Don't say it like that. Why not? You think he can hear us? Derek laughed. He's basically a plant. Still, she said, voice cracking. It feels wrong to stand over him like this, talking about money. Derek moved closer. I could tell by the shift of the air. Listen to me, he growled. You came to me, remember? You're the one who said you were drowning in debt. You're the one who said he'd never give you a divorce. You wanted out. You wanted his money. You knew this was the only way. Linda sniffed, quiet, shaky. I know. No, Derek hissed. I get. She inhaled. This was the only way. That's right, Derek said, soothing again. Manipulative. And we're almost done. Once he's off life support, you collect the payout. We clear what I owe you, get your freedom, and we start over somewhere warm. Miami, Arizona. Wherever you want. Freedom. Freedom that required my death. I tried again. God. I tried with everything left inside me. I pushed at my chest, my throat, my lips. Nothing. I remained a silent witness to the planning of my own funeral. Suddenly, the door opened. Dr. Fulton walked in, mid-40s, calm voice, the kind of man who spoke like he kept a neat desk and a tidy life. Oh, Linda. Derek. The doctor didn't question Derek's presence. He must have thought he was Linda's brother, or cousin, or just another visitor, paying respects to the old man who wouldn't wake up. How's he doing? Linda asked sweetly, shifting into her grieving wife performance. Well, Dr. Fulton hesitated. I'm sorry to say we haven't seen any improvement. No neurological reflexes. No movement. No eye response. No cognitive signs. No cognitive signs. The words landed like gravel on my chest. But, Linda said, doing a damn convincing tremble, but his heart rate. Dr. Fulton shook his head gently. Reflexive spikes. Completely normal in cases like this. I know it's hard, Mrs. Hale, but your husband isn't aware of anything. He isn't here anymore. I was here. God damn it, I was here. Derek stepped closer to the doctor, too eager. So, what happens next? He asked. Next, Dr. Fulton said carefully, we wait a little longer to see if there's spontaneous activity. If nothing changes, we'll discuss end-of-life care. I know that conversation is difficult, but we'll guide you. Linda sniffed theatrically. Thank you, doctor. I just want what's best for him. What's best for him? A neat death, a clean payout. The doctor left and Derek shut the door again. The silence after was suffocating. Then Derek whispered low, dark and full of something that made my blood freeze. Just remember, Linda, if that old man wakes up, we're both dead. You understand that, right? Linda didn't answer. But I didn't need her to. Because I already understood one thing. With absolute soul-deep certainty, the accident wasn't an accident. And if I didn't find a way to fight back, I wouldn't make it out of this hospital alive. I don't know if angels are real, but if they are, then that day, one of them walked into my room, wearing a pale blue scrub top, silver hair pinned back, eyes shaped by a lifetime of watching people slip away. Her name was Margaret, 58, widowed. A woman who had seen too much, lost too much, and somehow still carried compassion in her hands. She stepped into my room near the end of the shift, right at that lonely hour when the winter sun in Ohio turns hospital hallways the color of bruised amber. It wasn't even her assigned round. She just passed by the door and stopped. I couldn't see her, but I heard her slow, thoughtful footsteps, the kind you only hear from someone who knows exactly what sorrow costs. Frank Hale, she whispered, like she was calling for a spirit. They said no neurological reaction. But she paused. I felt her shadow fall across my face, felt her studying me. A moment later, her gloved fingertips brushed my cheek, soft, almost unsure. Are you crying? Margaret murmured. I was. God, I was. I'd been trying to cry for days, trying to send any signal I could, but everyone else dismissed it as a reflex, another clinical term that stripped away my humanity. But Margaret wasn't like everyone else. She pulled up a chair. I heard the metal legs scrape against the floor as she sat too close for someone who believed I was unresponsive. Frank, she said, voice trembling slightly, if you can hear me, try something. Just blink. One time. If you understand me. I gathered every ounce of strength left in my failing body, every spark of life that hadn't been crushed by fear and betrayal. And I blinked. Once. Margaret sucked in a breath, sharp, emotional, disbelieving. Oh my God. Frank, you can hear me. I heard her voice break. I heard her heart begin piecing things together with the instincts of a woman who once cared for a husband who couldn't move or speak. She knew exactly how real awareness looks and how differently real tears fall. She leaned in again. You don't have to push yourself, she whispered. I know you're here. Silence filled the room, the kind that rearranges the air itself. Then she spoke again. If you understand me, blink once, if not blink twice. I blinked once. Margaret began to cry softly. She closed the curtain tightly and shut the door until only a thin line of hallway light seeped through. When she came back to my bedside, her voice had changed. It wasn't trembling anymore. It carried suspicion and experience. Frank, she whispered, I need to ask you something. A beat. Your wife, Linda, has she done anything that worries you? I blinked once. A long exhale left her chest. I thought so, she murmured. There's something about that woman. Something off. She lowered her voice until it was barely a breath. She's asked about hospice care for you. 3 times. Another pause. Frank, hospice is for end-of-life patients. Once you're moved there, she can legally request the ventilator to be reused. My heart pounded weakly against my ribs, and the monitor beeped Worcester. I know, Margaret said quietly. I know something isn't right. Then she stepped away, rummaged through a drawer, and returned with a laminated alphabet board. I heard the plastic scrape against the bedside rail as she positioned it where she believed I could see. Frank, she whispered, with an urgency I'd never heard in her, Before we're going to communicate it, I'll point to each row. When I hit the right row, blink. Then we'll go letter by letter. I wanted to cry again out of relief this time. Ready? She asked. She began reading the first row aloud. A, B, C, C, D. I blinked. Okay. A, no. B, no. C, no. D, I blinked. D, she said, barely containing the tremor in her voice. The first letter is D. Let's keep going. We moved to the next letter, then the next. Each blink felt like breaking through the surface of a frozen lake, like reclaiming a tiny piece of myself from whatever hell Linda and Derek had tried to bury me in. And then Margaret phones. I heard her breath catch. Frank, she whispered, her voice hollow with understanding. You just spelled. She swallowed. D-E-N-G-E-R. I blinked once. Confirmation. Margaret shot to her feet so fast she knocked the chair over. It clattered loudly on the tile floor. Oh my God, she breathed. Frank, you're in danger. I had been screaming that truth inside my own skull for days now. Finally someone had heard me. I wasn't alone anymore. If there's a hell designed specifically for old men like me, it's the kind where your life depends on blinking on cue, while a stranger pieces together your truth, one fractured letter at a time. Margaret stayed with me long after her shift ended. The halls outside quieted, the hospital lights dimmed, and one by one the voices faded into that strange holy silence only night shift workers ever really hear. But she didn't leave. She dragged the chair closer, steadied her trembling hands, and whispered, All right, Frank, we're going to take this slow. Tell me everything. Everything. It felt like trying to empty a flooded basement using only a spoon. But I didn't have the luxury of stopping. Not now. Not when someone finally believed me. Margaret lifted the alphabet board again. We'll keep going until you're too exhausted to blink, she said. Then after a beat, or until we have enough to key you. The first thing I spelled was Linda. Margaret nodded. Your wife, what about her? I blinked twice. New word. She slid her finger to the top row and began again. A, B, C, C, D, blink, D, good, next letter. We went through it again and again and again. 3 minutes later, Margaret whispered the word under her breath, like it tasted sour. Cheating. I blinked once. Oh Lord, she rubbed her forehead. Frank, I'm so sorry. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I spelled another word, slow, grueling each blink, like lifting a car off my chest. G-A-M-B-L-E-S. Margaret froze. You mean Linda gambling? I blinked once. She reached for her notepad, an old spiral notebook, stuffed in her scrub pocket, and wrote it down with pen marks so deep the paper nearly tore. What else, Frank? She whispered, looking at me like a woman bracing for an earthquake. Next word, M-Y-M-O-N-E-Y. Blink, blink, blink. Yes, you're saying she used your money. I blinked. To pay her debts. I blinked again. I could hear the horror in Margaret's breath. Frank, how long has this been going on? I didn't know how to spell years fast enough, so I spelled L-O-N-G. She understood. But Margaret was a widow who had spent her life reading between the lines. She sensed more. Did she force your hand financially? Did she get you to sign something? The air in my lungs felt thinner, just remembering it. I spelled slowly. P-O-W-E-R-O-F-A-T-T-O-R-N-E-Y. Margaret covered her mouth. Oh, dear God, she made you sign power of attorney. I blinked violently. Yes. For convenience, right? She asked, voice cracking. Something about the hospital insurance. I blinked again. She wrote furiously, the paper scratching under the weight of the truth. That gives her access to everything, Margaret whispered. Every account, every asset, every decision. A beat. And the ability to authorize withdrawing life support. My heart monitor ticked faster. She noticed, placed a hand on my arm, warm and steady. "It's okay, Frank. I'm here." But her voice shook. We moved on. Margaret cleared her throat, held the board higher, and spoke cautiously. "There's someone else involved, isn't there?" I blinked immediately. Hard. She went, still leaning in. "Tell me who." It took 10 minutes, 10 agonizing minutes, before the letters formed the name I'd been dying to scream into the world. Derek. Margaret's whole body stiffened. "The man who was here earlier," she breathed. The younger guy, dark jacket, always standing too close to Linda. I blinked once. Margaret pressed a hand over her chest as though steadying her heart. "And what did Derek do, Frank, tell me?" I felt the weight of that next word before we even began. Row 1, row 2, blink, letter by letter. A slow, torturous confession. Frakes, she frowned, trying to piece it together. Then her eyes widened. "Brakes, Frank, brakes." I blinked. Once, sharp. Margaret staggered back a step. "Oh my God, Derek touched your brakes. He sabotaged your car." I blinked again. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. Her breath came shallow, panicked. "That wasn't an accident," she whispered, voice cracking. "It was never an accident." No one had said it out loud yet. Not the doctors, not the police, not even me, not with my voice. But now, here in this dim hospital room in the dead of night, the truth finally had sound. Then came the worst part. "Frank." Why? Margaret's voice trembled. Why would Linda do this? Why would she risk everything? It took the longest to spell. Not because the letters were difficult, but because each one felt like being cut open all over again. Lifeinsurance. Her mouth fell open. She increased your life insurance." I blinked. When I spelled 2weeksago. Margaret sat down, hard air, leaving her lungs in a single broken sound. "That's premeditated, calculated. Frank, this is murder. This is attempted murder." She began writing faster, flipping pages, scribbling every detail like she was terrified of forgetting a single letter. I could hear her breathing quicken, hear the fury beginning to simmer beneath her fear. "Anything else," she whispered. "Anything at all that will help me protect you." There was one more thing, the sentence that had been burning in my head since the night they leaned over my helpless body and thought I couldn't hear a word. It took nearly 15 minutes. My blinking slowed. My eyes burned. Margaret kept whispering, "You can do it, Frank. Stay with me," like she was praying over me. Finally, the last letter. She looked at the board, then at her notes, then at me. Her voice came out like a breath ripped open. "Frank, you spelled..." She swallowed hard. "SHEWANTSMEDEAD." I blinked once. Margaret's pen fell to the floor. And for the first time since the accident, someone in that room understood the full truth. Linda wasn't waiting for me to die. She was making sure of it. Margaret came back after midnight, long after the halls had emptied, long after the last rounds had passed. Her steps were soft, but there was a sharpness in the way she moved, a purpose, a plan. "Frank," she whispered, leaning close so only I could hear, "we need proof. Real proof. Not just letters and blinking. Something no one can deny." I heard the subtle click of a button. Then I felt it, something thin, small, cold, slipped under the edge of my pillow. Margaret pushed it just far enough to hide, but close enough for the microphone to catch every breath in the room. "A recorder. I'll be right outside your door," she murmured. "If they come, if they say anything, just hang on. I'll take care of the rest." Before she left, her hand closed around my wrist, warm, steady, the way someone grips a man dangling off the edge of a cliff. "You're not dying on my watch," she said. Then she was gone. And I was alone again. Alone but armed for the first time. They came at 9 to 17 p.m. I recognized Linda's perfume before the door even opened, sweet floral artificial. It used to mean comfort. Now it felt like poison drifting through the air. Derek came in behind her heavy boots, impatient breathing. He didn't bother pretending affection or concern anymore. Not when he thought I was as good as a corpse. Linda muttered, "Close the door." The soft click echoed like a gunshot. "Derek, I told you not to come tonight," she hissed. He ignored her. His voice was tight, hurried, coiled like a man running out of time. "We don't have days, Linda. I need the money now." "You think I don't know that?" Linda snapped. "You think I'm not scared out of my damn mind. That's the problem," Derek spit back. "You're scared. That's why you're dragging your feet." Then the truth spilled out, raw, ugly, and colder than the winter night outside. "I told you," Derek growled, "that loan shark crew is back in town. You know what they did to Trevor when he didn't pay. They won't wait. They won't negotiate." Linda whispered something I couldn't hear, maybe a sob, maybe a curse, but Derek didn't soften. "If this old bastard doesn't die soon, we're both dead before the insurance money ever clears." My heart pounded so loud I wondered if the recorder would pick it up. Linda's voice cracked. "The doctors said they're still evaluating. They might not approve hospice till next week. We don't have next week." Derek slammed something, maybe his palm, maybe his fist against the metal rail of my bed. The vibration shot through my body like an aftershock. "Do something," he snarled. "Speed it up." A silence, long, heavy, suffocating. Then Linda whispered, "I already tried. Twice. Last night and this morning. Tried what?" Derek asked exactly what I couldn't. "What the hell does that mean?" Linda inhaled sharply. "I unplugged one of his IV lines last night. It didn't do anything. And this morning I tried adjusting the oxygen flow on the ventilator, but the alarm started beeping. Nurses came running. I can't do it that way." My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, wanted to break free, but all I could do was lie there while they debated how to kill me faster. "You said he signed the paperwork," Derek said. "Power of attorney, insurance renewal, everything. So what's the holdup?" Linda let out a shaky laugh, bitter, cracked. "He didn't sign anything willingly. I had to wait until he was half-conscious from his meds. I held his hand, pressed his fingers around the pen, and dragged it across the paper. It was sloppy, barely even a signature. If anyone looks closely enough. So don't let anyone look closely enough," Derek snapped. "We're in too deep for second thoughts." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Rage, shame, and a humiliation deeper than any pain. Linda had taken my hand while telling me she loved me. And she'd used that moment to forge my signature. Derek paced the room, restless, dangerous. "You promised," he hissed, "that the life insurance doubled. That's $500,000 waiting for us." "It is doubled," Linda shot back. "But it only pays out if the death looks accidental or medical, not suspicious. If we mess this up..." "Suspicious," Derek barked. "You think cutting his brake lines wasn't suspicious enough?" Linda froze. My heart did too. She whispered, barely audible, "Keep your voice down." But the recorder heard it. The recorder heard everything. Derek scoffed. "I followed that stupid tutorial exactly. The brake line trick works. It's supposed to look like wear and tear. Do you know how many views that video had? People do it all the time." He actually laughed. "You're the one who panicked when the cops asked questions," he said. "I told you they weren't gonna dig that deep." Linda whispered sharply. "They did ask. They asked about service records. You said the car would look old enough to explain the failure." "Yeah, well," Derek muttered. "I can't control weather conditions. Ice helped, but I needed more speed. So what do we do now?" Linda demanded, voice breaking. We finish it, Derek said coldly. One way or another. A chill spread through my spine. That was when Linda's heel clipped something. A soft clink. A small shift of fabric. A moment of stillness. What was that, she said. I felt her move around the bed. Felt her hand lift my pillow slightly. Felt her breath hitch. Derek, she whispered. There's something under here. My blood turned to ice. Margaret. The recorder. Our one chance. Derek stepped closer. What is it? Linda bent down. The fabric shifted more. Her fingers brushed dangerously close to the edge of the device. Something's tucked here, she muttered. My monitor beeped faster, betraying my panic. And the last thing I heard before the recording cut off was Linda's voice, cold and sharp. Someone's been in this room. Margaret's plan, our one lifeline, was seconds away from being exposed. The morning after the recording, after Linda almost discovered the device, Margaret walked in with the stiff, guarded manner of someone being watched. I could hear it in her breath, could feel it in the way she hovered by the door before stepping close. She didn't speak right away. That silence told me everything. Finally, she whispered, Frank, something's wrong. And not just with Linda. Her voice trembled not from fear of being disbelieved, but from the realization that the danger wasn't just inside my marriage. It was inside this hospital. It started during her last shift. She was reviewing my chart on the computer, making sure no new orders had magically appeared, when a heavy, slow footstep stopped behind her. Margaret didn't need to look. She knew that gait. Rowan Tate, the night shift supervisor. A man in his mid-50s with a sour face and colder temperament, the kind of hospital employee who acted like compassion was inefficient. I'd heard him speak once, just once. I knew the type immediately. The kind of man who'd rather let an old patient fade quietly than deal with paperwork. Margaret, he said, voice flat. What are you doing with Hale's chart? She answered calmly. Routine check. But Rowan stepped closer. Too close. Routine, he repeated. You've spent more time in this room than any other patient in your wing. Margaret kept her voice steady. He needs attention. He's a hospice candidate, Rowan snapped. Your job is to maintain vitals, not analyze his case. Hospice, she repeated, startled. His neurologist hasn't approved that. Rowan paused, just 1 millisecond too long. Then he said, family requested it. Family. Linda. My chest tightened. Margaret stiffened. Rowan leaned in, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. Don't go digging into cases above your pay grade. Understand? There was no misunderstanding that tone. It wasn't advice. It was a warning. Later, after he walked away, Margaret ducked into an empty stairwell and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She wasn't easily intimidated. She'd survived watching her husband's body fail, day by day for years. Fear didn't get to her unless something smelled truly rotten. And Rowan reeked of something rotten. She couldn't trust him. Couldn't trust anyone tied to him. So she found someone who wasn't. Dr. Harris, a new attending physician, barely in his 30s, quiet but sharp-eyed, the kind who still believed medicine was about saving people, not managing hospital budgets. He wasn't part of Rowan's inner circle. He wasn't jaded enough to ignore his instincts. Margaret approached him in the medication room, whispering quickly, urgently, I need you to reevaluate patient Hale. Off the record. He frowned. Why off the record? Because, she said, I think his neurologic status has been misreported, and I think someone wants it to stay that way. Doctor. Harris's eyes sharpened. Are you saying he's conscious? Margaret nodded. I am. They came into my room together late that afternoon, Margaret wheeling in Keith the bored Dr. Harris, bringing a small flashlight and equipment bag. But the real giveaway was their behavior. Margaret didn't turn on the overhead lights. Dr. Harris closed the curtains fully, and neither said a single word until the door latched. Only then did he approach me. "Mr. Hale," he whispered quietly, "I'm not here in any official capacity. Just blink if you can understand me." I blinked. Once. He inhaled sharply. Margaret placed a hand on his arm. "I told you." He began a neurological exam, gentler, slower, more precise than anything done before. He watched my eyes, as if he were reading a Morse code only he understood. He asked me to track his flashlight, to blink once for yes, twice for no, to react when he touched my shoulder. Every response of mine tightened his expression. Finally, he whispered, "This isn't a coma. This is locked-in syndrome." Then he muttered something that filled the room with dread. Someone falsified his chart. Margaret hissed softly, "Rowan." Dr. Harris didn't answer. He didn't need to. He paced, running both hands through his hair, the weight of the discovery hitting him hard. "If his wife is requesting hospice," he said slowly, "and his chart claims he's non-responsive." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. They were going to end my life legally. On paper, I was vegetative. On paper, I wasn't there. On paper, the hospital could withdraw my ventilator without violating protocol. Dr. Harris stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "We have to document this ourselves, but discreetly. If Rowan finds out, he'll shut it down. Or worse." "Worse," Margaret echoed. Dr. Harris didn't answer. He just looked at me with eyes full of the kind of fear that made my bones feel like ice. "We'll do this carefully," he said. "Frank, I won't let them push this through." I wanted to thank him, wanted to give him something to hold on to, but all I could muster was one slow, deliberate blink. He understood. Then, just as they were preparing to leave, I heard hurried heels clicking down the hallway. Linda's heels. Margaret moved quickly, hiding the board, smoothing the blanket over me. A knock. Too soft. Too polite. Then Linda's voice, sweet and venomous. "I just submitted the request to withdraw his ventilator. They said the ethics board will review it within 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. Until she could kill me legally, quietly, and with full hospital approval." My time had just become a countdown. By the next afternoon, the hospital no longer felt like a place of healing. It felt like a stage half-lit, trembling, waiting for a final act that could save my life or end it. And Harris stepped into that role with the quiet determination of a man who had finally decided which side of the line he stood on. He entered my room, closed the curtain, and whispered to Margaret, "It's time." Margaret nodded once. No hesitation, no fear for herself, even though she was risking her job, maybe her safety. The plan was simple, on paper dangerous. In reality, Dr. Harris would call Linda, sounding solemn, telling her I was declining fast and she should come immediately. Margaret would contact a detective she trusted, someone she'd once encountered when her husband was dying. The police would arrive quietly, disguised as IT technicians, and plant a specialized microphone behind the wall paneling. Let Linda and Derek talk, believing they were alone with a dying man. Catch them admitting everything. A trap elegant enough for the truth, brutal enough for justice. The preparations took less than an hour. Police officers in hospital scrubs slipped into my room, like shadows lifting a panel, sliding in a micro recorder, so sensitive it could pick up a whisper from across the room. One officer leaned in close to my ear and murmured, "Don't worry, Mr. Hale. We're right outside." It was the first time in days that someone had spoken to me like a human being. Then the countdown began. Dr. Harris dialed Linda from the nurse's station. Margaret stood beside him, pretending to inventory syringes. "Mrs. Hale," Dr. Harris said, voice low, somber, "you should come now." Yes, as soon as possible. Frank's vitals are unstable. I think he may not make it through the night. A pause. A gasp, fake but believable enough. And then I'll be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes to judgment. At 7:42 p.m., the door opened. Not gently, not timidly, but with a sharp, purposeful push. Linda swept in first in a tight winter coat, mascara flawless, despite the weather. Derek entered behind her, jaw-clenched, coat hood still up, like a man hiding from the world. I smelled the cologne before he crossed the threshold. Cheap. Overflowing. The kind worn by men trying to mask fear. And Derek was afraid. I could hear it in the way he exhaled through his teeth. Why now, he hissed the moment the door closed. I thought they needed the ethics board approval. Linda snapped back. Rowan promised to push it through. But Harris says Frank is failing anyway. Yeah. And you believe that kid? Derek hissed. New doctor. Doesn't know a damn thing. He sounded convincing. Linda muttered. And even if he's wrong, I'll finish it tonight. A chill ran across my skin. Derek stepped closer to her, voice dropping to a growl. You'd better. I'm out of time, Linda. How bad? She asked. He let out a bitter laugh, thin, cracked. Bad enough that those guys were waiting outside my apartment this morning. Bad enough that they told me I had 48 hours to pay, or disappear. Linda's voice trembled, but not from sympathy. If Frank doesn't die, we get nothing, she whispered harshly. Nothing, Derek. I've put everything into this. She buried her face in her hands for a moment. Fake sobs, shaky breath, then dropped them with sudden coldness. I'm tired of waiting. He moved close enough that I could feel the vibration of their argument through the bed rail. Then do it, Derek whispered. Tonight. Right now. Linda glared at him. I can't do it while the doctor is in the hallway. Then wait till he leaves, Derek snapped. But this ends today. Linda let out a high, breathy laugh, one that scraped against my nerves. Do you know how easy it is? She exhaled deeply, her voice turning calm, confident, deadly. Just pull the ventilator tubing loose. 10 minutes. That's all it takes. I heard Derek suck in a breath. 10 minutes, he said, almost reverent. 10 minutes, she echoed. A silence followed, a vicious one, pregnant with plans neither wanted to say out loud, but both were ready to commit. Then the door cracked open. Dr. Harris stepped inside, wearing his calm professional mask. Mrs. Hale. I'm sorry, he said softly, Frank's showing no neurological response. If you want to say any final words, now would be appropriate. Loathing disguised as grief washed over Linda's features. She stepped closer to me, a rehearsed tremble in her voice. Oh, Frank, she sobbed, pressing a hand to my arm. Her voice lowered to a lethal whisper, almost done. Then she forced the tears back out and turned to Dr. Harris. Thank you, Doctor. We appreciate everything you've done. Derek stayed silent. Men like him hide in silence. When Dr. Harris left, they leaned over me again. Linda's voice hardened to steel. Derek, give me 5 minutes. I'll meet you in the parking garage. This ends tonight. He grunted in agreement. You'd better not chicken out, he muttered. Just trust me, she snapped. Then they walked toward the door, heels clicking, boots, thudding, breath fast. But fate wasn't done twisting the knife. As Linda stepped out, she nearly collided with Margaret. They stopped inches apart. Margaret murmured, "Xismstisi," but Linda didn't move. She stared long, scrutinizing, cold. A look that asked, why are you always here? What do you know? What are you hiding? Margaret felt it. I could hear her breath catch. Linda whispered, too soft for Derek to hear, you spend a lot of time with my husband, nurse. Not a question. An accusation. Margaret didn't flinch. She simply replied, voice steady. He needs someone. Linda's eyes narrowed. A pause. A dangerous pause. Then she stepped past Margaret and left the room. But that last look. That look told me one thing with bone-deep certainty. Linda had just identified her next target. And Margaret was now officially in danger. By the next morning, everything felt suspended, like the hospital itself was holding its breath. Detectives had enough audio to confront Linda and Derek, but they needed one last piece, the moment of intent, spoken clearly, unmistakably, with no room for misunderstanding. And they needed it during a legal act. That's why before dawn broke over Cleveland's frozen skyline, Detective Morales leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Mr. Hale, we're going to ask you to do something difficult." Margaret squeezed my hand, not tight, just enough to remind me I wasn't alone. The detective continued, "When she comes in to sign the ventilator withdrawal consent, we need you to stay still, completely still. No blinking, no reaction. Let her believe you were gone." It was the hardest request anyone had ever made of me, to pretend to be a dead man, while the woman who tried to kill me signed the final order. But I blinked once. Yes, I would do it. For Margaret. For Dr. Harris. For Jake, my son, who didn't even know I was dying. For myself. And for the part of me that still believed justice mattered, especially in the final years of a man's life. The meeting was scheduled for 2:30 p.m. At 1:55, Linda walked in. Not crying, not shaking, not grieving. She walked like someone coming to close a deal. Her hair perfectly curled, her makeup precise, her breathing steady and cold. Derek followed behind her hood, pulled low, eyes darting around the room, like a dog sniffing danger, but pretending he wasn't afraid. Dr. Harris was already inside, clipboard in hand, playing his part with heartbreaking professionalism. "Mrs. Hale," he said gently, offering the paper, "this is the final consent form. Once you sign it, the ethics board will complete their approval processes." Linda nodded, jaw set. She didn't look at me. Not once. "Do we really have to wait for the board?" Derek snapped. "Just pull the damn plug. Why make this harder?" Linda shot him a glare. "Shut up." Dr. Harris cleared his throat. "Sir, you aren't legally next of kin. Please refrain from interfering." Derek rolled his eyes, but his hands shook. "Mrs. Hale," Dr. Harris said, "take your time." Time. That was the one thing I no longer had. I forced my muscles, still every instinct screaming at me, to bolt upright, to grab the pen from her hand, to shout the truth, but I stayed frozen. A dead man who refused to die. Linda took the pen. Her hand hovered. And then Derek broke. Completely. "Just sign it," he hissed, grabbing her wrist. "I need the money now, Linda. I didn't go through all this to walk away empty-handed. All this." Dr. Harris subtly tapped his pen, the hidden signal. Detectives listening from the adjoining room leaned closer to the live feed. Linda yanked her hand away, voice rising. "Would you shut up? You think screaming in a hospital helps?" Derek snapped. "No. You listen to me. I risked my neck cutting those brake lines. I followed that damn video. Step by step, I did my part." Detective Morales whispered from the hallway. "Got you!" Linda hissed. "Lower your voice." But Derek was spiraling. "They're looking for me. Linda, those guys want blood. If you don't sign, we're both screwed." Linda threw her hands up, eyes wild. "I said I'm signing it. Frank has nothing left. Nothing, he's done." Then she turned to the doctor and spat. "He has no reason to live. He has nothing to live for. So let's end this, now." My blood boiled. My heart slammed so hard the monitor trembled. She looked directly at my body, lifeless, still empty, and said the last sentence she would ever speak as a free woman. "Lao Chang Konji de Somka." He has nothing left to live for. And that was when I broke my stillness. Slowly, Deliberately, defiantly, I opened my eyes, wide, alive, and I locked them onto hers. Linda froze, her face drained of color, like someone had pulled the soul straight out of her. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of my bed, whispering, "No, no, no, he can't. He wasn't, no." Derek backed away, hands up, stammering, "I didn't. He wasn't. This wasn't." The door burst open. Detectives swarmed the room. Linda screamed. Derek tried to run already. Rowan, who had been lurking in the hallway, was immediately cuffed as well. Rowan Tate Detective Morales announced, "You're under arrest for falsifying medical records and accepting bribes from Mrs. Hale." Everything unraveled at once. Linda sobbed hysterically. Derek cursed loudly. Rowan shouted about lawyers and misunderstandings. But none of that mattered, because I kept my gaze locked, unbroken, unwavering, on the woman who had called herself my wife. And in that stare, she saw everything, the betrayal she thought I never understood. The nights I heard her plotting my death, the pain she inflicted, the love she used against me, the years she didn't care about, the dignity she tried to steal. She saw it all. She broke first, collapsed to her knees, sobbing, "Frank, please, Frank, please." But I didn't blink. Not once. And that was the moment Linda Hale realized she had lost. Not because the police had arrived, not because the evidence was overwhelming, not because her lover had turned into a coward. She lost because the old man she tried to bury alive refused to die quietly. She lost because I was still here, still breathing, still watching, still alive. And my eyes, my only weapon, struck harder than any words ever could. Everything was over for them. But for me, life was finally beginning again. Months passed. Ohio thawed from winter into a soggy spring, and then into the heavy, buzzing heat of late July. Somewhere inside that long stretch of seasons, the pieces of my life, whatever remained of them, started stitching themselves back together. Linda and Derek stood before a judge. She sobbed. He blamed everyone but himself. The sentences came down hard and clean. To the newspapers, it was justice. To me, it was simply the universe finally balancing its damn books. Rowan, the hospital supervisor who nearly helped sign my death warrant, was indicted not long after. I heard he took a plea deal. I didn't bother to follow the details. Some men destroy lives not with knives, but with paperwork and silence. My world shrank to a rehabilitation center on the west side of Cleveland. It smelled like eucalyptus spray, old carpet, and the faint hum of people trying their best to stay alive. Physical therapy was brutal, humiliating, slow. I shook just trying to lift a spoon. I sweated through t-shirts, trying to move one stiff leg 2 inches. But every morning, Nurse Margaret stood there smiling at me, like I was conquering one mountain at a time. And maybe, in a way, I was. By the 3rd month, I could grip the parallel bars. By the 5th, I shuffled 10 shaky steps with a walker. By the 7th, I stood at the window overlooking the parking lot and whispered out loud for the first time, "I'm still here." Jake came back in the fall. My son, the boy, who'd grown into a man without me, carrying a quiet anger he never learned how to name, stood in the doorway of my rehab room, hat in hand, eyes glassy. "Dad, I'm sorry." Just that. Plain, simple, true. I couldn't walk to him yet, so I held out my arms, thin, trembling, and he stepped forward and met me halfway. We stayed like that for a long time, a grown man and an old one, finally letting something break open between us. Now he visits every Sunday, brings donuts, talks baseball, reads the newspaper in the chair beside me, like we're catching up on all the quiet moments we never understood how to share. Funny how almost dying makes a man realize what matters. As my body healed, something inside me flickered awake, A stubborn ember, I thought, had been snuffed out years ago. I started writing. Not about Linda, not about betrayal, not about brake lines or cold hospital ceilings, but about being 62, still alive, still training, and realizing the last chapter wasn't written yet. I wrote about grief that grows roots instead of wings, about rebuilding with what's left, about the strange, surprising mercy of second chances. CCs. Every page felt like reclaiming a part of myself, a part she thought she'd buried. And one night, as I scribbled in a cheap notebook Margaret gave me for Christmas, it hit me. Living well isn't just revenge. It's the only thing that keeps an old man like me moving forward. Maybe that's all life really asks of us. In the end, one reason to take the next step, instead of lying down in the past. Late November, a letter arrived. No return address. No handwritten name. Just a thin envelope slid under my rehab room door, like it didn't want witnesses. My hands shook as I opened it, partly age, partly instinct. Inside was a single typed sheet of paper. Cold, precise, chilling. You think it's over? There are things about Linda you still don't know. No signature, no clues, nothing but that warning. I stared at it for a long time, long enough to feel the old cold crawl up my spine again. After everything, the betrayal, the accident, the trial, the healing, I thought the storm had passed. But maybe, just maybe, there were still shadows I hadn't walked through yet. And the old man in me, the rebuilt one, felt something I hadn't felt in months. A familiar, uneasy shiver. Looks like my story isn't finished after all.